Hello, I'm Alicia Morgan, and I'm a senior at Texas A&M University. I'm not your typical college grad in that I'm 41 years old, and I've been in the workforce since 1996. I've always worked in human resources, and it's been my dream to achieve a bachelor's degree. Texas A&M was an easy decision for me because it allowed me to be home with my family, work full-time, and still pursue my degree. Now here I am at the end of the ride, and I'm excited to complete this last assignment. In this video, I'm going to answer 4 questions. The first question is, who was I as a leader before attending Texas A&M? I have worked in HR for over 20 years before getting my degree, so I have a lot of experience leading and following. I would describe my leadership style as more autocratic. My style of leadership has to do with doing things a certain way because I thought that was what was right. I knew what worked to motivate myself, and I assumed that what motivated me would motivate others. I'm a fairly self-motivated individual. And I assumed that others would be self-motivated as well. I saw this as a weakness in others if they were not self-motivated. I have a very strong work ethic, and if others weren't self-motivated, then I assumed they had a poor work ethic. Texas A&M has definitely taught me the value of using different skill sets to motivate people and to lead. In the past, I would lead from my heart, which wasn't always a bad decision. But sometimes when you lead that way, you do leave some people behind and you miss some opportunities. I had a coworker who described it this way. Imagine you have a toolbox, and in that toolbox you only have a hammer. Everything you try to work on, you will use that hammer. If your project involves driving nails, you will be successful. However, if your project involves unscrewing something, then you will most likely fail. Over time, you can build up your toolbox, and you can then use the appropriate tool for the job at hand. Before Texas A&M, I only had a hammer. And now, I feel like I have the screwdriver, the socket set, the drill, and even some pliers. The next question I want to cover is going over what I learned in each of my classes at Texas A&M. Texas A&M has 10 advanced classes, and each one of these classes brought a new tool to the organizational leadership toolbox. My biggest takeaway from these classes is that each one helped prepare me for my future as an HR leader. I completed almost all of my degree requirements at a community college and transferred those to Texas A&M University. So many of the classes before Texas A&M covered material with which I was already familiar. These advanced classes I'm about to go over gave me new learning that I'm already using today. In my first class, Issues in Organizational Leadership, I completed a personal leadership strategy. This plan helped me analyze fully what type of leader I was and where I wanted to be. I looked at my development areas and resources available to help me improve. I also analyzed my leadership style and developed a vision for where I wanted to be as an HR leader. I found this to be a defining moment to actually put on paper and write out in words my vision as an HR leader. I started in HR because I wanted to make a difference for the employees in the company. This vision will ensure I stay on track. My second and third classes were on data-driven decision-making. The workbook created in Data-Driven Decision-Making 1 is a tool I will utilize in my career. The workbook allows me to ask the right questions about an issue and ensure the activity will move the organization forward. The workbook looks at the question from the standpoint of the organization to ensure the most good comes from the analysis. It also walked me through the stakeholders involved and helped me understand what they would be looking for from the data analysis. Data-Driven Decision-Making 2 allowed me to actually learn how to analyze the data and pull from the data answerable questions. This class taught me how to apply the data. In this class, I created an executive summary. The data set was provided and I drew conclusions from the data. This was a good experience to give me practice determining what would be important to stakeholders. Would senior leadership care about the top 5 producing customers? Would they want to see the highest grossing locations? These are the types of questions I had to ask, and then I had to draw the conclusions from the data. Next, I took a class on behavior, ethics, and leadership. Again, there were 2 parts to this class. In the first class, I completed a case review after reading Michael Hoffman's case study on the Ford Pinto. This class was eye-opening to me. For the first time, I was able to read the information and pull from it different leadership tactics. The case review I completed caused me to dig deeper and fully absorb what type of leadership practices were seen. I felt very good about my case review and especially proud of my ability to dig deeper into the information presented and synthesize an opinion of the leadership practices and ethical decision-making shown by Ford. The second part of this class on behaviors, ethics, and leadership involved the case study of the turnaround of Nissan. The leadership style of Carlos Ghosn was highlighted. His characteristics of leadership are the attributing reason as to how Nissan was able to turn around from the brink of bankruptcy. I feel there were many cultural contexts behind the scenes at play for Mr. Ghosn. His ability to understand the Japanese culture was very interesting to me. His background allowed him to be set up for success so that he understood that the Japanese culture was collaborative and humane-oriented. He was able to relate to them, and that is the attributing success for the Nissan turnaround. He used his knowledge to work across the cultures and make Nissan successful. Next, I studied Leadership Theory 1 and 2. Leadership Theory 1 taught me to create a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. This is often referred to as a SWOT analysis. I chose Pier 1 Imports as the company to focus on. I'd recently been shopping in Pier 1 and I was wondering why they didn't have a larger footprint, so I felt like this was a good company to do the SWOT analysis on. I enjoyed the SWOT analysis because it encouraged me to be creative and come up with ideas for opportunities for improvement. I essentially got to create recommendations on how the business could improve their footprint and be more competitive in the marketplace. I also learned about the internal and external factors of a SWOT. Another piece of this analysis that was new to me was looking more deeply at competitors of an organization and analyzing how those competitors are positioned in the market. My background has always been HR, as I stated earlier, and looking at finance and marketing tactics is not my forte, but I appreciated the learning experience and I know I will use it in my role going forward. This class definitely expanded what I saw as my role in the company. In Leadership Theory 2, I gained more knowledge that was new to me. This class taught me how to complete a process improvement plan. This plan allowed me to identify the steps associated in a process and which key metrics are important to stakeholders. I was able to learn how one would go about setting metrics for improvement and what those numbers may mean to an organization. Through this process, I learned the inputs and outputs for a process. I learned about process configuration, including diagramming a process. In this plan, I detailed current metrics and then developed target metrics with an acceptable mean, upper, and lower controls. This class helped me understand how to detail a process, diagram the process, and create metrics for improvement. My next class was on leading change. It was great timing because I was working on an assignment for my company that involved a reorganization. The change management plan walked me through step by step what needed to occur to ensure a smooth reorg. I learned about organizational readiness to ensure it is good timing for a change. I also learned about resistance to change and how to overcome it. The class discussed addressing the reason and the scope of the change. It took you through a logical procession of the current and future states of the organization. The plan was useful in addressing each state. The plan also made sure to address the people being affected by the change, and as an HR professional, this was something that was very important to me. The plan looked at information sharing to ensure the proper people have the right knowledge throughout the execution. Another key aspect of the plan was to look at the stakeholder analysis and determine the driving, advocacy, active participant, and willingness and understanding roles. I'm confident I can take on a new project at work and know the steps necessary to bring it to a great finish. Finally, I was ready for my capstone courses. My first capstone course was probably my most interesting assignment out of all the courses I took at Texas A&M. I was tasked with interviewing 2 individuals. They needed to be leaders in an organization, and I had to write a paper analyzing their leadership styles. Again, this project taught me to see past the words and analyze the method behind the styles. I interviewed 2 very different leaders, and I enjoyed each one immensely. The first leader was a senior director at a company for which I currently work. He was young in his leadership, he was about my age, and he had a different style of leadership from the next person that I interviewed. His style of leadership related more to millennials and younger people, whereas the next person I interviewed was very senior in his company. He's a president, and he had many years of experience, and he was more traditional in his leadership style. Both of these gentlemen were good enough to spend multiple hours with me as I asked them questions and learned about their leadership. And they helped me understand their styles. I learned that leadership is a process. You don't just wake up one day and decide to be a good leader. I learned that good leaders make mistakes, they're willing to admit those mistakes, and most importantly, they strive to do better. Good leaders care about their followership, and they recognize what their people are experiencing. Each of the people I interviewed did their best to make things better for the people that followed them, and I respected them for that. My second capstone tasked me with completing a strategic analysis on one of the companies represented by one of the people I interviewed. I chose to do my analysis on the company for which I work currently. In this assignment, I drew on many of the previous tools picked up from other classes. I used the SWOT analysis and the decision-making tool. I delved into the leadership styles. This was definitely the toughest assignment in the course. It covered almost everything learned in all of the other classes combined into one project. All right, so back to the questions. The next question is, who am I now as a leader after finishing the bachelor's degree at Texas A&M? I feel like I've moved from just having that hammer in the drawer to having multiple tools, maybe even finishing up the first drawer and having to store tools in the second drawer. I feel like I can analyze the situation and respond with the correct tool to secure a successful outcome. While I know I have much more to learn as a leader, I feel I've actually begun to use more of the tools and put them in application already. Through practice, I'll make mistakes and I'll learn from those mistakes, but now I'm not afraid to make a mistake. I know that if I use the wrong tool, I'll be able to stop and figure out which one is the right one. The last question for this video is, as a leader, where do I go from here? As I mentioned earlier, I'm already working. It's in a job that I really enjoy doing, and it's for a company that I enjoy working for. I'm not a traditional graduate. I don't need to update my resume and start looking for a job. I will continue in my role in HR at my current company, and I will look for opportunities to use my knowledge. Completing this bachelor's in organizational leadership has shown me that I do truly want to be a leader in a company, and I'm going to work towards that goal. I'm enjoying my current role, and I see much opportunity ahead for me.